So now we're going to move on to our replay of this episode, which is Spec Ops The Line. This is a game that came out last generation. Was it around like 2011 or something like that?
Something like that.
What's that?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so this was like, this is a very interesting game. 2012. This game came out in a time where, kind of like Call of Duty Modern Warfare was in its heyday. Every game was trying to be the next modern setting military shooter. And you can see that in a lot of like the gameplay in this game and the, on its surface aesthetic of this game. And of course the title. I'm not really familiar with the Spec Ops series as a whole. This was the first one I played, but I guess it's an older series.
Yeah, they're very different.
Yeah. So it's the whole Spec Ops in the title of this game is a little strange and probably a little misleading as well if you're a fan of the what the series used to be. So anyway, the setup here is you're Captain Walker, voiced by Nolan North, Nathan Drake himself, and doing the Nolan North standard voice. So every time he talked, I couldn't help but hear Nathan Drake talk. And you go into Dubai, which is the capital of this. Boy, there's so much to there's so much to talk about with the setup of this game, because it came out at a time when Dubai and the United Arab Emirates was very weirdly portrayed in the media as like this Western version of the Middle East, where they're like, oh look, even the people over in the Middle East, they can make a really cool city that looks like our cities, and maybe we should think about them a little bit differently. I don't know, it was weird. You don't really hear too much about Dubai anymore, but anyway, they get sent to Dubai that has been overrun by a giant sandstorm, because it's basically a city built in the middle of a desert. And previously a army battalion had been sent in to aid in the evacuation of Dubai in lead up to these sandstorms, but they got trapped in the city, as well as the citizens did, and you as Walker and your team get sent in to find out what happened, because like all communication got cut. They never got out of Dubai, and you're just kind of going in to see like what's going on. Is everyone dead? Are they still there? What are we doing? So you and your small team, you have Lugo, and who's like the tech guy and kind of the wisecracking Joker kind of guy, and then Adams is the heavy weapons guy, and he's a little bit more straight edge. And yeah, it starts out as like a pretty typical military shooter, cover shooter. So it's pulling a lot from like Gears of War, and I was just talking about Uncharted, very similar cover system to that as well. And yeah, you just kind of are moving through these very linear levels. But what ends up being a kind of a big change in this game is the story that's being told. It starts off as like, hoorah, army, kind of another one of those games. But then it quickly turns into like a reflection on what is war, like what does it do to us, and was at the time kind of a little bit revolutionary in the way it handled that, because games like Call of Duty and stuff weren't really tackling those kinds of subjects. They were just kind of like, you're the hero warrior and you're going in and you're saving the world. And that's kind of like where I guess we can start talking about the game. So yeah, what did you guys feel of? We should probably start with the story, just so we can get that out of the way and make sure we have enough time for it. How do we think that the story unfolded, and do we think it was effective? Do we think it was handled well? Are we confused? What did we think of that?
It's oh, sorry, go on, Derek. Go on.
I was just gonna say, did anybody like previously play this and are revisiting it? Because like for me, this was my first time playing this.
Yeah, I guess we should start with Derek, because he's the one that hasn't played this before. I played it. It wasn't when it came out. It was a little bit later on, and I know Lee, you've played through it a couple of times.
Yeah, about a couple of rounds.
So let's start with Derek, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so like when I started playing it, I kind of got into it because I like these types of games. I like the story aspects of like shooters, like when Call of Duty had its stories, and like the other different games out like this. So I kind of got into it right away with the story and what was going on, and then like following the different events that unfold as you're going on. Like I'd say about maybe midway is where it kind of starts getting like, okay, what's going on here? Because you start out like you're coming in, you're trying to find these people, that's your mission, and then as soon as you start running into like the actual, I guess the 33rd that's there and the other faction that's kind of like in Dubai as well, it's like, okay, what's really going on here? Because everybody's kind of like twisting the light of what's there in their own way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that part is what makes that twist at the end so much more like impactful, because like once you get to the end of it and it kind of like reveals everything to you, it's just like, whoa, like, and then the way it shows you as like going back to the beginning of the story, and then each of those big scenes that you went through that, you know, had like cutscenes to it too, like you're just kind of like, whoa, okay, I didn't even pick up on that, but now that it's showing this again, like, I totally get it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of like, it was an interesting way of tackling, like, how it affects your mental being in war, and having that kind of stresses on you and stuff. Is like what the overarching aspect of what the story was out there to do.
Mm-hmm.
Is like that's how I take it in, like, this story was out here to like hit on this aspect of like this happens, like people can get like affected by.
Yeah. By today's standards, do you think it did a good job of telling its story? It being the kind of different story it is for a shooter.
I think it did. Especially like I said, a majority of it, like the way I feel it was so like impactful to me is because the way it did it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think if you would have known in the beginning,
right, it
would have been the same as it being revealed at the end and then revisiting the entire thing.
Right. So you didn't. It isn't like you picked up on it throughout. It was still like still a shock, like, even today.
Yeah, like. It started off, it was straightforward, you know, in the middle it kind of got hairy because you're trying, like, once you hit the middle you're kind of connected to these other characters and you know how they interact with your characters. So once they start saying stuff and like, it's like, okay, what's going on here? And then once that light gets shined on you at the end, you're like, oh, this makes sense now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the story is obviously based somewhat on Heart of Darkness, which is the story about I know the Apocalypse Now version, which is Vietnam. I don't think the original was Vietnam. No, I read the original too. It's a pretty short read and it's a good one. Anyway, basically the setup is you are going into this unknown area where this rogue general, or is it a general in this, or is he a colonel in
I think he's a general.
General. And you're going into
Colonel.
Colonel Conrad. Okay, yeah.
Named after the author.
Yeah.
Joseph Conrad,
So yeah, Joseph Conrad wrote the original, and Colonel Conrad is the presumed person you're going to be rescuing / turned villain / turned to you. And basically you were sent into this unknown area to try and figure out what happened to this rogue general, or in this case colonel, who was in charge of this 33rd battalion that was sent in to Dubai. What you find out is that he has gone mad and is kind of like turned himself into a bit of a messiah, like being the only person giving hope to not only the soldiers that are trapped in the city, but also the native citizens that are trapped in the city. They can't get out because of these sandstorms. And there's a lot of like how do they manage food, how do they manage water, how do they manage all this stuff, and what the moral of the story is, sort of the theme is, what does it take to turn somebody, like to make them go mad like that? Like what does it take to get to the heart of darkness, as the name suggests. And this is a retelling of those same stories. And like Colonel Kurtz in Apocalypse Now is the same character. And he's kind of like taken, like adopted the Vietnam citizen, the Vietnam people that were Cambodia did that take place in, taken them and made almost like a cult around himself. And yeah, so you go in and your job is to investigate it. And that gets revealed over time. And there are actual choices in this game that you can make at certain points. There are people that you can choose to kill or not kill. And I don't know. I don't remember how I played it originally because it was so long ago. And I don't know what those changes, what changes based on your decisions at the end of this game, if it's much. Does anybody know? Did anybody look it up, or has anybody played it enough times to know what the differences are, if there are any?
This doesn't vastly change, but it does kind of tweak a few things.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't massively change the outcome at the end.
Right.
It's not RPG levels of changing the plot.
Right. Is it more like the differences at the end of BioShock, where it's like you get a slightly different cutscene or something like that?
Kind of like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Dotted throughout.
And yeah, there are definitely moments in this game that stand out, like the red phosphorus bombing that you do, which is where Walker, as the commander, starts to show his kind of like his he's starting to lose control, because he just kind of immediately jumps on this conclusion that they need to use these red phosphorus mortars to take out these soldiers that are in their way. and what they end up doing is finding out that the soldiers that were there were actually helping civilians, and they ended up killing a whole bunch of civilians with the attack that they issued. And then that is the that comes back at the end, that like haunts him for the rest of the game. But he like Walker keeps trying to cover it up and being like, hey, it's the mission, you gotta do what you gotta do and stuff like that, even though you can tell that he's not, like he's breaking down, and is slowly not believing in that mantra. So there's also like aspects of other entities in the story, like the CIA is there and they're doing their own weird thing, and you encounter some of them. I guess the end of this game, watching it here and seeing it again, I wasn't 100% sure. Was it trying to insinuate that you are Conrad, or that you became the new Conrad?
I think it's insinuated that he committed suicide before when the extraction failed, something like that.
Okay.
And then you've just kind of rationalized it all in your head, and obviously kind of you're hearing it's all very it's
It's almost like you kind of like brought on his ideals, like because I guess like it kind of seemed like that you knew him beforehand.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
coming into this and wanting to find this person.
So there was definitely a connection between Walker and Conrad before the game. They were in some sort of conflict, and it sounded like it went bad, and Conrad was able to rescue Walker. Like it may have been a situation where they were the only two that survived. And the result of that was like Conrad was made out to be a hero in like the public sense, but had all of the baggage of actually having to deal with everything that happened. So like he wasn't like really a hero in his own mind because of his failure to be a good commander. But symbolically and publicly, he was, awarded medals, and like the only guy that could do something as substantial as evacuate the entire city and stuff like that. So Walker was bringing in this baggage when he came into the city, and is it even made clear whether or not they're there on actual orders, or there was some insinuation that suggested that, because you don't see anything before them just walking into the city, that like if this is actually a sanctioned mission by the army. I felt that there was a little bit there too, suggesting that maybe he may not be there under actual direct orders from the army, that may be more personal than that.
Yeah, I think that's what it was like they weren't supposed to be there. Mm-hmm. They kind of like went there out on their own, and they kind of like, I guess it would kind of show at the end, like once you do that end scene, and then it brings you after the I think it's after the flashbacks. Mm-hmm. That's kind of like reveals everything to you. Then you're standing there, and it's the army, like, hey, who are you? and then you
Yeah.
get the choice to either like lay down your weapon or shoot them all.
Yeah, that was like afterward, like way afterward, after you realize that the colonel is
Yeah.
dead, and you make the choice between shooting the colonel in the mirror or yourself.
Yeah.
Which did you choose?
I think I shot the mirror.
The colonel.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we all did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because then it goes from that to like the flashbacks where it shows everything, and then like once that whole long thing is done, then you're like kind of outside there.
Yeah. Yeah, so then at the very end, like Derek was saying, you walk out of the main tower building, and basically you've turned into what you thought Conrad was. You're like a rogue commander of the army, and the army has shown up. The rest of the army has shown up to be like, what the hell are you doing? You know, put your gun down. We're here to basically save you and the city finally, and you can choose to either do that or
take them all out.
Yeah, open fire and survive as long as you can against all the soldiers that showed up. I chose to shoot everybody.
Yeah, that's what I did to kind of like follow with like how the character developed at the end. I was like, all right, this kind of like, for me it was like, okay, this kind of seems like what this character would have done here because of his state of being.
Yeah.
But then it just kind of like ends after that. So.
Yeah. Is that what you did too, Lee?
I believe so. Yeah. I can't remember, to be honest with you. I don't even think I finished it second time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I didn't. I got through enough. Yeah, but I'm pretty sure you like to shoot it out. I'm pretty sure it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So playing this again. So when I originally, it's a short game. It's like you can get through in like 6 hours. And I remember when I played it the first time, I kind of ended up playing it in one sitting because I was so engaged with it. Like I had not really known too much about it, just that it was on Xbox, and I don't know if I had rented it because I don't have it digitally on Xbox because it is backwards compatible now. So I'm not really sure exactly how I originally played it, but like I said, I did it in basically one day, and back then it was even more confusing at the end because it was like 2 or 3 in the morning when I was getting to the end of the game, and I was like delirious and super tired, and then all of this crazy insane stuff happens. So that made it even more like, what the fuck did it just happened? And then this time around, I don't really know if I totally took what they were going for this time as well, but I think I understand it a little bit better. Yeah, it's there's definitely some things I think they could have done a little bit more clearly at the end. As you can all tell that we're all a little bit not 100% sure what happened, but I think we got the gist of it. I think the thing that stood out to me the most this time was the kind of uninspired gunplay. I think it plays fine. I just think it's a very unprofound gunplay experience. Like the weapons feel very weak. They don't sound very powerful.
Yeah, the sounds are horrible.
Yeah, it's like all like there's a bunch of different machine guns, and they all kind of feel exactly the same. And I guess one thing I did notice was like ammo was pretty scarce. I was running out of ammo for a lot of the guns as I was playing through the game, and I guess that's mostly because it didn't feel like I was even shooting the guns most of the time, and I was just kind of like spraying at the enemies and hoping I was hitting them. Yeah, it's I guess it's okay. It's fine. Is I guess what I would say. It's not bad in that if you're playing it today, you're not going to be like, oh my god, this is like a 90-year-old game and it sucks. It's just okay. Like it's you can tell that they were going for like the a cross between Gears and Uncharted in terms of the cover shooting, and they kind of didn't lean in any direction enough, in my opinion. Like, Gears is a much heavier feeling game, and Uncharted is way more like nimble and light in terms of its shooting and moving around and stuff, and it kind of strikes this balance without feeling like particularly special in any direction.
It's weird. I feel like in a weird way it's kind of both by design and by kind of, it's not much fun to play, but it feels like that's what they're kind of going for in a weird way.
Yeah, I kind of got that a little bit too, and I don't know if I'm just giving it a little bit too much credit.
I think like
but war isn't fun. Oh, sorry, go on, Derek.
Oh, I was just gonna say like one thing that was kind of weird was like mentioning like the gameplay and the feel of it was like the actual setup for keybinds, because like I played it on PC. And I had to like remap almost the entire game just so I could play it, because for some reason they did not go with like the universal default for shooters is this set of keys. You can get in front of any game and you know what the keys are because they're all the same. And this was just absolutely different. Like spacebar was your sprint and run. And like each thing that you'd go to switch back so you could have that like regular feel, so you kind of felt like you knew what you were doing, at least with keyboard and mouse. Like I'd fix one thing and then I'd fix something else and then fix something else, because then it would keep like clearing out those, because they used the same set of keys. It just everyone was something different that
everything was mapped differently,
and it was so like unorthodox. I was like, at one point I just kind of sat there and I looked at the keyboard because I was like, okay, where can I put this now? Because I've gone so far down the line. What's going to work for making it through this?
You went down the line, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, God.
I guess maybe this is all coming back around, and the real madness is trying to map your keyboard to make the game playable.
Yeah, it was, because I tried to jump in there and like just start going through it, and I was like, wait a minute, this isn't right at all. What's going on?
It fucks with you anyway when you play it. Like within the, although the story is kind of Apocalypse Now for Dummies in a weird way, there's little things around it that are actually more effective than the story, like cutscenes in between that kind of give you like tutorials, like a game really should. Like do this, do that, and the other, and then it starts to do some bizarre kind of psychological thing at you, kind of talking at you, kind of as like kind of the character in the game or you as a person about kind of, I don't know if you noticed they kept doing that, like almost like weird subliminal commentary towards you.
With the cutscenes, something I was going to mention about the.
Go on.
Oh, sorry. Like I was gonna say, like with some of the cutscenes and stuff, like they look absolutely horrible. Like the game doesn't look bad actually playing it, like where you're playing it, but when it cut to like those couple cutscenes and stuff, I couldn't tell what the hell was going on. It just became like this muddy mess.
Yeah. So on PC the game looks pretty good. It's pretty sharp and everything. It doesn't really have good anti-aliasing, so there's some jaggies here and there. But all the cutscenes, like you said, Derek, are filmed like very fast-paced action cutscenes. So like the camera is like super close to everything that's going on, and at least I noticed, like whenever there was action, it was just like it was moving so fast. It's like what somebody's
It was like
running, somebody's
it was
running and then
super
jumping, and then
pixelated
like
too, so I don't know if it was just
it was
you know, it was like super pixelated. And, like I'm playing on a 1080p screen, so I don't have anything like super
Really?
crazy, and like they just all looked like garbage.
I
I don't know.
didn't
Maybe I
I
should like
didn't
go back
yeah
onto YouTube and see if I can find like a compilation of the cutscenes, and, like kind of
yeah
compare and
I
trash.
didn't have that problem, and I was playing it on PC too, with a controller on my TV, which is 1080p. Um, and I didn't notice like that kind of stuff with the cutscenes. They played,
Huh.
they looked okay. It was just like the action and stuff. Was like because of the way that they framed it, and a lot of it anyway was like hard to follow like what was going on, because they were like I said, running and shaky cam and then jumping over something, and then there's an explosion, and then you were back in the action. Um,
Mhm.
so Lee, what we were talking about with the like subliminal stuff, I don't know if I picked up on that.
Yeah, if you play it again, as the game starts, you'll get kind of, when you get like the loading screens for towards the next level, and it'll give
Mm-hmm.
you tips of gameplay tips around the game. As it goes on, it gets a little bit more twisted, and the game starts to talk to you to the point where eventually it's like you realise what you're doing.
Oh yeah,
You've
okay, yeah,
lost it and
I
stuff
remember
like
that.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Um,
that's all quite, that's quite good storytelling when the story is kind of very nuts and bolts, Heart of Darkness.
yeah.
Yeah, but again, it's all that thing that designed to make you not feel very good while you play it. Like you
Mm-hmm.
say, where the gunplay is kind of rudimentary at best, and it'll give you something fun to do. It's like shoot the glass.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be cool, and then you'll see the sand falling, and then you
Right.
realise there's collateral damage after that. For having that fun, you've then paid for that because now everybody that lives in the building is screwed.
Yeah.
And it's like it constantly kicking you in the teeth, and it's notable to point out that this was an utter failure, this game. And
Yes.
I feel like maybe they went too hard on the war is bad, and maybe you should feel bad for doing this. They maybe went too hard on that, and kind of
Yeah, I don't know.
noble, but maybe a bit of a mistake.
I think I don't know what was going on. Um like when this game came out, like what the advertisement campaign was for it, if it was talking about all of this stuff, or if it was a surprise when it came out and people played it. Um or like 2K maybe buried it because of what it ended up being, and they're like, we can't advertise this. This is going to be like, people are going to hate this because it's not Call of Duty, it's something else.
It
It's
was in
like
the middle.
it's like
I remember
making
it
fun
coming
of
out.
Call of Duty.
Yeah. It
Um,
came out when it came out. It was kind of in that middle thing because obviously there was 9 previous games, which were a
yeah,
little bit more like. Remember old Rainbow Six before they started getting Vegas and stuff like that.
yeah,
Kind
they're
of quite
way more
strategic.
tactical. Yeah,
Yeah, it was like that, and then they throw it in like this, and they didn't kind of. It confused people on both ends because it wasn't what it was, but then they didn't quite sell it as what it was now either.
hmm
So it's kind of a weird middle ground of just generic brown or gold, in this case, shooter.
yeah,
So yeah, it fell between two stools a little bit, advertising wise.
yeah. Yeah, because it would be, I would say it would be very difficult to, especially back then, advertise a game like this. Today, not so much. I think
Yeah.
we're expecting a little bit more from our games today, in terms of,
You could do that game now easily, but
Yeah.
it'd probably be better in several ways. It'd probably be more refined in every way.
maybe, I don't know. There's something about it coming out when it did, and it's like the purity in which it exists in a way,
Mm.
where it's like obviously way ahead of its time in terms of that, and like
Mm.
I just like it, looking back on it the way it is, and being like I don't know, it's weird, like replaying it again. I was like, this actually does do all of this really well, and I think with what it was working with in the way that it was addressing most of its story and the way it was handling it, is probably, yeah, it would probably come out better today, but as a like sign of the times kind of thing. I think it's a cool thing to have, the way it was, the way it is, the thinking about it in the context of when it came out and what it was dealing with, and what was there anything that came before it that influenced it and stuff like that. Yeah, it's a weird one, that's for sure.
Obviously, there were games previously like your early Medal of Honors, which show you kind of the consequences of war. But this was the first one that showed you the ramifications of war, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
That came around, if you get what I mean. That thing. So you had gritty kind of war's not great, guys, kind of thing, like storming the beach on Medal of Honor games, but not really going into kind of the crux of.
Right, like the
really morally reprehensible.
Right, like the fact that war takes place in usually somebody's backyard, and like how does that, like, that never gets addressed, and like certainly not Call of Duty or Battlefield or even a lot of Hollywood movies and stuff like that. Obviously Hollywood movies have done it a lot more than games have, but yeah, this is like, this is taking place in a, what was at one point a civilian city, and these are all these people's homes, and you're just kind of going in with a giant machine gun and kind of spraying indiscriminately without really understanding who you're even shooting at, or why you're shooting at them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Only collateral damage came up and think of. Definitely.
Yeah. Unless you get into like different genres like strategy games and stuff like that, they've been dealing with that kind of stuff right along. But this is the first time that it's been like, hey, this is a tactical action game, hoorah, and you're murdering civilians and stuff like that. And weirdly enough, Yager really hasn't done much since then. They've had a very bizarre history since this game.
Wow. They did Dreadnought. I did not realize that, because I played something that's like way different than what Spec Ops is.
So the next game they put out was Dreadnought, which is like a multiplayer spaceship, but like
it's kind of like
fly around and shoot like boats, like they have big like cannons and stuff like that. And now they're working on something. They're working on something called The Cycle, which I don't know what that is. I haven't heard of that.
If I remember right, the reason they went kind of missing for so long was they got stuck in that whole Dead Island 2 thing.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, they were supposed to do Dead Island 2.
For about 3 years. Yeah. Let it go.
But even then, their first game was in 2003, and then their next game was Spec Ops: The Line in 2012.
Yeah, maybe they just...
Yeah,
maybe they got lucky. Maybe they just take good writers.
I don't know. It's just another layer on the weirdness of this particular game.
Yeah, it's an odd that.
But yeah, I think overall it does still play today. And Derek, you picked out that line from the radio guy.
Yeah.
That was like, why are we like we are today? Is it because of the video games?
Yeah, it's like, all this violence, is it because of the video games or something like that? Like, it was a lot more long-winded. Like,
yeah, it was.
That quote itself was like, I just remember hearing it, and then I think I messaged you guys right away, and I was like, damn.
Yeah.
Like, especially with like all the stuff that's going on right now, it's just like it just hit like right there. It was like,
Yeah.
wow. Like I saw actually when I messaged you guys, I stopped playing right there for a second. I was like, just like,
Whoa.
This game's held, and it's hitting right now like that.
Yeah. Well, surprise, that's not a new argument being made.
Yeah.
Yeah, the radio guy, which actually for the most of it I think is the person you're actually talking to. Yeah, he has the line. I believe it's yeah, like you said, it's a little bit more long-winded than that. It's like, why are we all so violent? Is it because of the video games? Yeah, it must be because of the video games.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And then you don't kill him, but somebody else does. That was another thing that I wanted to bring up is so there are like Intel pickups that you can find, and they do a very good job of filling in the blanks of what's going on. Like in there you can read them, but they're also read by the voice actor that would have written them. And they add a lot of good context to what's going on in Dubai. So it's one of those situations where if you can go and seek those out, because I think that they're worth it in this particular game to kind of flesh out some of the story. And they're not like super hidden or anything like that. They're usually like at the beginning of a level or at a calm moment where you'll easily find them. So I would recommend doing that to fill in some of the context.
Okay, I found exactly what that line was. I scrolled back. It says, "Where is all this violence coming from? Is it the video games?" Yeah, it's the video games.
Yeah.
And it was like during this, like, I think it was like during one of like the action sequences when you were like outside going across somewhere, just like.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was when you were going to storm up that radio tower where he was living, where he was broadcasting from. You were like in the lobby of that building or something like that, and yeah, he delivered that line. Yeah, it is an interesting game for sure. And yeah, I think it's definitely worth checking out. What did you pay for it? Like $7 on Steam?
Yeah, I think it was actually like $6. I think it was $5.99.
Yeah, it's on sale quite a lot on Steam. And yeah, that's the version I have too, which I probably played similar to it. However many years ago I bought it. Yeah, quick romp, like a good 6-7 hours, 8 if you really take your time, and it's worth, in my opinion, it's worth checking out if you haven't, for yourself, just to fill in kind of like a piece of gaming history, as it were, because it's such a standout game in terms of like its history and what it's doing in terms of storytelling and stuff like that. Thank you for joining us in this very special episode of Voxel Viewpoint. If you'd like to hear or see more, please consider subscribing to us on your favorite podcast app, subscribing to us on YouTube, or visiting voxelvoice.com, where all of our great content comes together in one place. Also check out the Voxel Voice Facebook group, where you can join in on the discussion with a great, like-minded community.